Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. If you live in a mild winter climate, mid-September through mid-October is the best time to care for or renovate your lawn. And we get organic lawn care tips from organic landscaper Steve Zien. And we have the plant of the week. It's a dependable blooming perennial from late spring through mid-fall in warm climates. Warren Roberts tells us about the Gaillardia. It's episode 139 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. And we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go. Fall is for planting. Fall is also the time for lawn renovation if you live in a warm winter area. If 40% or more of your lawn is in really bad shape, then you may want to consider a lawn renovation in September or October. But again, that's the mild winter areas, especially here in California. If you live in a cold climate, springtime is probably the best time to do it. What's involved in renovating your lawn? What can be done to perk it up? There's plenty. Well, let's bring in Sacramento's organic advocate, president of Living Resources Company, Steve Zien. And Steve, let's talk about fall lawn care from an organic gardening perspective. There's a lot of products out on the market that are weed and feed products that people tend to put down in the fall and are suggested for some lawns in the fall.
And these are typically broad. It's a broadleaf weed killer, so it kills not grass, which has a very narrow leaf. It hit broadleaf weeds like clover and things like that. And the problem is it does not select what kind of broadleaf plant that it kills. And so a lot of your shrubs and trees, in particular birch, elm, hackberry, maple, redbud, oak, and ash, are very, very susceptible. And if you're using that 2,4-D in the lawn and you've got roots under there, and realize that tree roots go well beyond the drip line, 2 to 3 times beyond the drip line or more, which is the outermost branches. So if you've got an average size lot and you've got, a tree in there, even though the lawn might be far away, the roots of that tree are probably there, and they're taking up that 2,4-D, and it will weaken them, make them more susceptible to pests, and has killed them. And so it's damaging to your landscape, potentially damaging to your landscape plants.
Talk a little bit about 2 words people may see on these weed and feed products that bear definitions, and those words are pre-emergent and post-emergent.
Yeah, pre-emergent prevents the weeds from growing. And it's really important when you use a pre-emergent, especially in mild seasoned areas where we don't have a lot of frost and very little, if any, snow, and things basically keep growing year round, although slowly. There are what are called winter weeds and summer weeds. And you need, in the fall, to make sure that your pre-emergent weed killer, if you choose to buy one, and I certainly don't recommend them, I recommend against using them, but if you insist on using one, make sure that it is for fall use, because typically broadleaf weeds are annuals. They die every year at the end of their growth cycle. And there are summer weeds that germinate in spring and grow all through the summer, and then they die in fall. And then there are the winter weeds that germinate in fall and grow all winter and die in the spring. And they're different weeds, and the herbicides in many cases need to be different to kill those weeds. So make sure you're getting a pre-emergent this time of year that's going to deal with fall weeds.
And it's important, too, to also, if you're applying pre-emergent or post-emergent weeds, which we'll get into in a second, that you also read on the label if it can be applied to the type of lawn you have, because different products affect lawns differently, and there are just some, especially post-emergent products, that you do not want to put on certain types of turf.
Yeah, always read and follow label direction. It's really important after you put the pre-emergent down not to scratch or do anything to the surface of the soil. If you, for example, take a rake or you dethatch or something, it will kind of eliminate the coating that these pre-emergents put over the soil surface, and it will allow the seeds to germinate. When you put down the pre-emergent, and then you water it in a little bit, it basically puts a shield over the soil surface. And as the seeds germinate, they come up and they hit this barrier and it kills them. If you scratch the soil, you put cracks in that barrier and the weeds will come up. There is an organic pre-emergent, I will say this, that I do recommend, and I know people who have had really good results with it, and it's corn gluten meal. And there are some organic fertilizers that contain corn gluten meal as either one of the ingredient or the only ingredient. Corn gluten meal also has a fair amount of nitrogen. If you look at the bags of fertilizers, nitrogen is that first number. And typically, if it has corn gluten meal, it might have 10% or 9% nitrogen if it's only a corn gluten meal weed and feed. And it's really not a weed and feed. It's a weed, or it's a feed and weed preventer.
Right. It's a pre-emergent. Now, I have understood that corn gluten meal is more effective in areas that get summer rain, like the Midwest. I've heard of great success with corn gluten meal as a pre-emergent in the Midwest. I haven't heard much success of it here on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's interesting because, University of California actually did some research. I don't know how extensive. And they found that, it didn't work very well. Although I know of people who have used it, some in the professional horticultural industry, and have had great success with it. If nothing else, you're feeding your lawn because it does have, that nitrogen in there.
Let's talk about post-emergent herbicides, those weed and feed products that contain a product that's going to kill existing weeds. And I know this is going to raise your blood pressure, but why do people want to control dandelions?
I think after World War II, the chemical industry that was making bombs, there was no need for bombs anymore and explosives. And so they had to figure out, what to do with all of those chemicals. And they decided they figured out that they can make weed killers out of them. And so there was this big, huge campaign that everybody should have that perfect lawn. And to achieve that perfect lawn is very, very easy. You just put down these chemicals on your lawn and it will eliminate dandelions and it will eliminate clover. All of these things that, used to be considered a regular part of a lawn, in particular clover. Before World War II, people used to add clover, and I actually recommend adding Dutch white clover to the lawn. It is more drought tolerant. It has deep roots, so it breaks up clay soils if you have clay soils that don't drain very well, and it manufactures nitrogen. Years ago, when the park districts had money and there wasn't the objection of using herbicides on public parks, you could see where if they didn't use the herbicides, if you would look out where the lawn is and if you could see green spots that were nice and green, you could walk over there and every single time, if you looked hard, you would see there's a lot of clover in that one spot because it's manufacturing the nitrogen and feeding the grass plants and making everything nice and green. And so it was really the chemical industry telling us after World War II, you can have that perfect lawn. And it's very, very easy to do. And everybody thought, well, wow, yeah, that's what we want. And so we were convinced that that's the way to go. And in the case of clover, we were eliminating what was considered, and I still consider, a very, very important part of a healthy lawn. If you've got a golf course and you've got a putting green, maybe you probably don't want the clover there, but in your average home lawn, it's a good thing. And if you're, a lot of people say, well, clover's got the flowers and it attracts bees. And one of the things in maintaining a lawn properly is to mow it frequently. You never want to cut off more than 1/3 of the blade of grass, or you will stress the lawn, make it more susceptible to pests. And if you're mowing, so that you never cut off more than 1/3, you will be mowing that lawn often enough where the blooms of the clover will just beginning to be opening up, and then you'll mow them down, and so you really don't see very many blooms if you're mowing properly.
We'll have links in today's show notes about the proper mowing height for various types of turf, and it really pays to mow at the correct height. You're going to have a healthier lawn with a healthier root system. Most people tend to cut their lawns too short, or they have a mow and blow service that is cutting lawns too short. And if you do have a service that is cutting your lawn, make sure that their mower height matches your turf. Fescue, cool season fescues, for example, need to be mowed tall. They need to be kept much taller than what you normally see on a cut lawn for the overall health of a lawn. And that's how you get a healthy lawn, is by treating it right to begin with.
Yeah, and also you're going to have fewer weeds. If you have if you're mowing properly, most of our lawns are cool season grasses that should be mowed at roughly 3 to 3.5 inches high. And most people mow them much closer, almost like golf greens. And by mowing high, like you said, you're going to have deeper roots, and it also will shade the surface of the soil. And so when weed seeds germinate, if you have a thick, tall lawn, those seeds aren't going to get any sun, and they'll die. That's part of your pre-emergent weed control system, is having that tall lawn.
We're glad to have Smart Pots on board supporting the Garden Basics podcast. Smart Pots are the original award-winning fabric planter. They're sold worldwide. Smart Pots are proudly made 100% in the USA. I'm pretty picky about who I allow to advertise on this program. My criteria, though, is pretty simple. It has to be a product I like, a product I use, a product I would buy again. And Smart Pots clicks all those boxes. They're durable, they're reusable. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value stores nationwide. To find a store near you, visit smartpots.com/Fred. It's Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred for more info and that special Farmer Fred discount on your next Smart Pot purchase. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. Let's get back to our conversation with organic landscaper Steve Zien regarding fall lawn care. Okay, well, this is all sort of a scenic bypass to why we're here in the first place, which is sort of a fall lawn renovation, especially if it's looking poor and you want a good-looking lawn. Here in the West, September, October is the time to do it. In the cool part, in the mild winter portions of the West, in the Midwest, back east, maybe in spring you would do this, but you're going to cut your lawn as short as possible. Then you're going to water the lawn thoroughly to soften the soil, wait a day or two, and then you're going to dethatch, aerate, fertilize, overseed, and add compost. And,
exactly.
And you're going to have the greenest lawn on the block.
Yeah. And then I would also recommend, in addition to the compost, throw in some worm castings. I love worm castings.
No, you do.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. All right. And the point of the fertilizer is it's a starter fertilizer. So it's going to have a different nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium content than others. And unlike what your A local water agency may be advising if you're starting a new lawn like that or a rehabbed lawn from seed, it's okay to water it every day lightly 2 or 3 or 4 times until it's up and growing after a few weeks, and then you can go back to a normal watering regimen or one that is legislated in your area. But for a new lawn, you do want to keep it evenly moist, and it may take 7 or 14 days for the seed to germinate.
Yeah. Also, you would like the soil surface to be almost dry at the end of the day, especially when the seeds are sprouting. You don't want those leaves wet when the sun goes down. So your last irrigation should be a couple hours before sunset, because then if the blades of grass are wet all night long, you're kind of encouraging disease problem.
We use the terms dethatch and aerate, and thatch is the unseen enemy of your lawn. If you have a lawn that's looking poorly, there are brown spots, here's something you could do. You could cut off a square of lawn, go down about 8 inches or so in a perfect small square, maybe 8 inches or so square, and bring up that whole chunk. And you'll see the green grass on top, but then you might see 1 inch or 2 inches or 3 inches of dead lawn, and then your soil. Yep. And that basically means that air, water, fertilizer can't penetrate to the root zone of your healthy lawn because of that thick layer of dead material, also known as thatch. And that's when you bring in a dethatcher, and it's amazing the amount of dead material you can bring up.
It really is amazing how much you can have. And also, I will say that if you're using synthetic fertilizers and pesticides on that lawn, you are much more likely to have a thatch problem because you're killing the biology that normally keeps that thatch under control. You can go to your local nursery if you have a small lawn. They have what are called dethatch rakes. And basically, they're like a garden rake, but instead of having a thick tine, the tines are knives. And it just cuts through the thatch. I will say that hopefully you have a very small lawn if you're going to try and do it that way, because it's a huge amount of work. It's really hard, back-breaking work. You can also go to your rental yards, and they rent dethatch rakes. It's like kind of like a lawnmower, but instead of having the blade go parallel to the lawn, it goes perpendicular to the lawn, and they have lots of blades. And it just slices and dices your lawn. Well, it doesn't dice, but it slices up your lawn, and it brings the thatch to the surface, which you then have to rake off.
And that's why it goes much quicker with 2 people. You have one person pushing that power dethatcher, also called a vertical mower, and then the person behind it raking up all that thatch into a pile off the lawn. And it's not uncommon to pull up what could easily be a cubic yard of dead material from a lawn that may be only a couple of thousand square feet.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen pictures where a person had an average size lawn, and the pile, that he got was almost as high as he was and as wide as he was. Yeah. It was just huge pile.
And then you would aerate, and aerate is not walking over your lawn in golf spikes. That is not aeration. That's compaction. Right. Well, how does an aerator work?
Well, an aerator works by using what's called a spoon. It's a tine, but it's hollow. It's basically a hollow tube. And depending upon what kind of aerator you have, it might have 3 or 4 tubes that work off of a crankshaft, or it might have like a barrel with hundreds of these what are called spoons. They look like, just imagine like a test tube that is got an opening on both ends. And when it is inserted into the soil, when your soil is moist, it fills up with that soil, and then it comes out of the soil. And when it goes into the soil again, there's a hole on top, and the soil that is being forced into the tine pushes the soil that was in the tine before from the previous insertion out the back end.
And it's resting on top of your lawn, and you can either break it up and just rake it back in the lawn, or rake it off and put it someplace else.
or just leave it there and it'll be there for a couple of mowings. If you're going to overseed, and if you're doing a real renovation, you want to, you can maybe just drag a piece of chain link fence. That's what golf courses do when they aerate. They just have a chain link fence dragged behind the aerator, and that'll break up most of those cores.
Then you want to spread that starter fertilizer and a lawn seed that closely matches your existing grass over the area. And then you want to roll it. You want to press that seed into the ground. And usually the best thing for that is back at the rental yard or local nurseries will sometimes lend them to you. They're water-filled rollers.
Yep.
And while you're getting the water-filled roller, you might as well get one of those cages that spreads compost.
Yeah. And I do want to say, if you're using an organic fertilizer, which is what I would recommend, if you get your typical, most of your organic lawn fertilizers, or you can use an organic starter fertilizer like Fred just talked about, or you can use an organic lawn fertilizer because they're slow release. But you want to make sure that it has some phosphorus, which is that second number when it has three numbers. Because some of the lawn fertilizers don't have any of that second number, because back east in particular, it's a real pollution problem and it's damaging the lakes. And so a lot of the national brand lawn fertilizers have removed the phosphorus. And so you'll see like a 905, for example. And that second number will be 0 because of the legal restrictions they have back east because of the pollution problem.
Phosphorus is for root development. Now, in organic lawn fertilizers, can they have phosphorus in it?
The organic sources of phosphorus are not as subject to runoff, which is the real problem with the synthetic sources of phosphorus. In some states and some communities where they have these guidelines where they restrict phosphorus, some of them have differentiated between the organic sources and the synthetic sources, and the organic sources are allowed in some areas.
If you're balking at the price of paying for an organic lawn fertilizer, consider this. Usually on organic lawn fertilizers, you only have to apply it twice a year. With synthetic lawn fertilizers, they might suggest 4 or 5 times, maybe every 6 weeks. And if you compare the price in that regard, organic fertilizers is a much better buy and less work for you.
It's less work. You're not having to go to the store to buy it as frequently. You get a much healthier soil with the organic fertilizers. The synthetic fertilizers are high in salts, and they kill the beneficial soil biology. The organic fertilizers stimulate the soil biology. Depending upon your organic fertilizer, they may even have beneficial biology in that bag with the fertilizer. And that beneficial soil biology extends the area that the roots can absorb water and nutrients. They provide pest protection. They make a much happier and healthier lawn that will resist pests, both diseases and insects. So you're saving your money in reference to pest management, and you're going to have a better quality lawn.
And again, the final step is to spread that thin layer of compost over the entire area, and the cages, the rolling cages that you can get from either nurseries or rental yards, eases that process quite a bit. It doesn't have to be a thick layer. You're not burying the seed with the compost. It's a very thin layer that will work its way into the soil in no time.
And then you lightly roll it.
So after dethatching, aerating, and overseeding here in the West, you can do it either in the fall or in the spring. Back east in the Midwest, you probably want to do it just in spring. After you do that to renovate your lawn, you're going to have the nicest looking lawn on the block.
Yeah, and then you'll get that thick lawn, which will prevent the weeds, especially if you're mowing it high, as appropriate for the type of lawn that you have.
Treat it right, feed it right, and you will always have a great-looking lawn. We got a lot of great fall lawn care tips about renovating a lawn and applying pre-emergent and post-emergent weed controls as well as fertilizers, courtesy of Steve Zien, Sacramento's organic advocate, Living Resources president. Steve, thanks for all the good lawn tips today.
Yeah, it's been fun as always, Fred.
You have a a small yard and you think you don't have the room for fruit trees? Well, maybe you better think again, because Dave Wilson Nursery wants to show you how to grow great tasting fruits, peaches, apples, pluots, and a lot more in small areas. You could even grow them in containers on patios as well. It's called Backyard Orchard Culture, and you can get step-by-step information via the Fruit Tube videos at davewilson.com. And that's where you're going to find the closest nursery to you that carries Dave Wilson's quality fruit trees. So start the backyard orchard of your dreams at davewilson.com. Every week, we like to talk with Warren Roberts out at the UC Davis Arboretum, find out about the plant of the week. He is their superintendent emeritus, one of the wisest plant people I know. And Warren, today's plant is commonly called the blanket flower, but it is one of my favorites because it is definitely a bright spring, summer, fall bloomer, the blanket flower, a.k.a. the Gaillardia.
Yes, the Gaillardia is native to the southwest of the United States, but not California. It's a plant that needs a little bit of summer rain, which California really doesn't provide. But the parents of the Gaillardia are native to Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and down into Mexico. And mainly what we grow is not the wild species, but we grow, of which there are, 28, I guess, in North America. But we grow a hybrid called Gaillardia grandiflora. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and there are many varieties that have the word Arizona as part of their name. There's Arizona Sun, and one of my favorites is Arizona Apricot.
Yes, many different varieties. The parent species are Gaillardia aristata and Gaillardia pulchella. And we know things are going well when you see the word pulchella, because that means basically beautiful, I guess. Anyway, there are hybrids that are very low growing, maybe 5-6 inches tall, and then some that get up 2 feet or more in size. I particularly like the dwarf ones because you never have to worry about staking them. And about, I would say once every 2 or 3 weeks, it would be worth going through and kind of sprucing them up a little bit, because the seeds are a kind of a tan color and they do detract a bit from the display. The main colors are red and yellow, usually together, but there are forms that are just red or just yellow. It likes the heat. It likes the hot summer sun of the West. But it can grow also, commonly cultivated all over the country, the United States anyway, because it's a really good summer blooming plant.
It's gorgeous. It's a member of the Asteraceae family, which means that it probably has a flat flower. And that flat flower, that daisy-like flower, very attractive to beneficial insects and pollinators. And so if you're looking to attract the good guys to your garden, it's hard to beat the Gaillardia in the summertime.
Yes, and it also attracts hummingbirds, too.
It's exactly. Yeah, it's a very forgiving plant, too, because as you mentioned, those seed heads do sort of detract from the color of the flower. But I find just taking a pair of shears out there and whacking the plant back by a few inches or so, it recovers quickly.
It does recover quickly. It will reseed as well. And although it's listed as an annual, in mild climates, it will continue to grow and live year-round.
Yeah, exactly. The Gaillardia, Gaillardia, also known as the blanket flower. If you're looking for bright reds, oranges, and yellows for a part of your sunny yard, you can't beat a Gaillardia.
Nope, they're a good, useful flower for any garden and easy to grow.
Full sun, moderate water. Yes, indeed, the blanket flower. Warren Roberts, Superintendent Emeritus of the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. Check him out online, arboretum.ucdavis.edu. Warren, once again, thank you for the plant of the week.
You're welcome, friend.
Garden Basics comes out every Tuesday and Friday. It's brought to you by Smart Pots. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out, and that includes Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, Google, Podcast Addict, CastBox, and Pocket Casts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. We appreciate it.